Bio. This is Mr. B. Continuing on with Chapter 11, we've focused on genetics so far, and we've mentioned the word gametes before, being sex cells, and now we're going to talk about the process that forms gametes, and this process is called meiosis or meiosis. I've heard it both ways. I'll probably just call it meiosis for the most part, and I think most of you have heard this term before, so hopefully this might be a little bit of review, but we'll get into what exactly we're going to need to know about this process. So before we get into it, we need some background information, and hopefully you remember all this because we've talked about this in class. And the first one being that each organism must inherit a single copy of every gene from each of its parents. And the reason why parents is in bold there is because sometimes, again, we talk about asexual reproduction where they can reproduce with just one organism without two separate parents. So that's why parents is in parentheses there. And then gametes are formed by a process that separates the two sets of genes so that each gamete ends up with just one set. So we know that we get a parent from mom, or we get genes from mom and we get genes from dad. So in order for those genes from mom and dad to get separated, it has to, again, they have to become apart in some process, and that's what meiosis does. And then a little more background information, the next one being chromosome number. All organisms have different numbers of chromosomes. If you remember from our online mental activity, humans have 23. And the example that they use in your book here is that a body cell, an adult fruit fly, has 8 chromosomes, 4 from the fruit fly's male parent and 4 from its female parent. So they probably use a fruit fly as an example because it's a lot easier to understand. It's kind of an even number there. So fruit flies, in every adult, they have 8 chromosomes. 4 came from the male parent and 4 came from the female parent. So it's pretty simple stuff there, just half and half. Some coming from mom, some coming from dad. And the term that we use to describe these sets of chromosomes are that they are homologous. And this just means that each of the 4 chromosomes that came from the male parent has a corresponding chromosome from the female parent. So when you're homologous, it just means that you match up with another set of chromosomes. So homologous chromosomes just mean they match up. That's all that they mean there. Homologous chromosomes, that's going to be an important word for you to know. It'll probably show up on your quiz, so I'd make sure you wrote this down. And then a cell that contains both sets of homologous chromosomes is said to be diploid. So in a normal body cell, so like the cells that grow in your skin and your stomach and things like that, these cells have chromosomes that are diploid because they have one set that's from mom and one set that's from dad. And this number of chromosome in a diploid cell is sometimes represented by the symbol 2N. Just why they chose the letter N, no one really knows. It just means that there's 2 sets of chromosomes. And for Dropsilia, that's again the scientific name for the fruit fly. We haven't got into classification of organisms, but we know that there's a scientific name, and that's what it is for the fruit fly. And this number can be written as 2N equals 8, just being that the diploid cells, the normal cells, have 8 chromosomes. And then another term that we need to know that's kind of the opposite of this is that when gametes are formed, that the gametes of sexually reproducing organisms contain only a single set of chromosomes and therefore only a single set of genes. Whereas in our normal cells we have homologous chromosomes that are matched up together. Now in our gametes, in our sperm and in our egg, this kind of goes out the window. And these cells are said to be haploid because they only have one set of genes, and haploid cells are represented by the symbol N. And in the fruit fly, the haploid number is 4, which can be written as N equals 4. So that's going back to, again, there's 8 in our normal body, but then in the gametes, in the sex cells, there's half of that, so therefore it would be 4. And how this 8 turns into 4 occurs during a process of meiosis. So what happens during this process of meiosis? So the definition first, for those that don't know it, which again, a lot of you in class say that you have heard of this before. Meiosis is a process of reduction division. So reduction means things getting smaller. So reduction division, in which the number of chromosomes per cell is cut in half through the separation of the homologous chromosomes in a diploid cell. So that sounds like a mouthful, but what it means is we take our normal body cell, again, and usually when we divide during mitosis, all the chromosomes get replicated and then they split apart. But in meiosis, the chromosomes get pulled apart and they don't get matched back up. They are They are kind of on their own there. It's reduction division, so it's division in which it gets smaller. So what's getting smaller is our number of chromosomes per cell. So we start with a diploid again. We'll say with our fruit fly, 2n equals 8. Then after it goes through reduction division or meiosis, our chromosome number gets pulled in half. So now n equals 4. So that's what meiosis is. And meiosis involves two divisions, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. And by the end of meiosis 2, the diploid cell, again our 2n cell, our normal cell that entered meiosis, has become 4 haploid cells. So we go from 2n, or we go from, yes, again, 1 diploid cell to 4 haploid cells. And this is kind of what the stages of meiosis 1 look like, and we will go over each one of these and what happens in each phase. So during interphase 1, which again, we didn't necessarily say this was part of mitosis, but it needs to be mentioned, cells undergo a round of DNA replication, forming duplicate chromosomes. So again, we just make new chromosomes. And that's the first phase. And then in prophase 1, each chromosome pairs with its corresponding homologous chromosome to form a tetrad. So a tetrad just means 4. So a definition of a tetrad is 4 chromatids. There are 4 chromatids in a tetrad, and you can see that we have them all. That we have 2 tetrads in that picture right there. And so that's what happens in prophase 1. They match up with each other. And then when homologous chromosomes from tetrad and when homologous chromosomes form tetrads in meiosis 1, they exchange portions of their chromatids in a process called crossing over. And crossing over produces new combinations of alleles. So if we look right here, we have A and B, and then they just kind of come over here, they cross over, and you can see we have a portion from our brown chromatid has moved to our purple, and a portion of our purple has moved over to our brown. And then during metaphase 1, our spindle fibers attach to the chromosomes, which again, that's same as what happens in our other stages. And then in anaphase 1, the fibers pull the homologous chromosomes towards opposite ends of the cell. So again, this is all review. The main difference being, as you can see, our chromosomes there have crossed over. They've exchanged information from other chromosomes. And then our last stage, the nuclear membranes form. The cell separates into 2 new cells. And then the 2 cells produced by meiosis 1 have chromosomes and alleles that are different from each other and form the diploid cell that entered meiosis 1. So this is our big difference here. We're finally having cells we have chromosomes that are different from when we began, and that's our main difference here. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions.